Hi, welcome. I'm here catching up with Marc Benioff. I'm here in Planet headquarters, and we're here for a conversation about sustainability and business and how they work together. So, hi, Marc. Thanks for joining us. I hope this is going to be a lively conversation. Thanks for coming to Planet Explore.
Well, it's great to be with you. I am so thrilled to see everything that Planet is doing and the tremendous progress and innovation that you have accomplished this year. Well, it's amazing.
Thank you so much. So let's get into it. So we're talking here to talk about sustainability. I came to your Dreamforce event. It's really fantastic. You know, companies like yours are pioneering how we can be sustainable companies, how businesses can lead the charge. You know, you're doing your effort to go net zero. You've got your sustainability cloud. But I wanted to ask you a tough question first. Are we in general, is industry in general taking this seriously? Or is this greenwashing, 2.0? Are we now taking sustainability seriously? What do you think?
Well, I can tell you that based on my personal experience, that many companies in the world are taking this extremely seriously. And it's not just a topic that we're jumping in because, let's say, we feel the innate desire to do it. I see now a tremendous shift, especially with European CEOs who are moving quite rapidly to make adjustments to their company based on the new EU Green Deal. You can see that when companies actually are put up with the concept that they're going to have to pay a carbon tax, that means they need to think about what are their emissions, what are their sequestrations, what are they doing for their total sustainability program. This is becoming very real for a lot of CEOs, and I think that this is a moment where we're going to see tremendous progress.
Well, I'm really glad you're optimistic like that. I certainly feel that change as well. It seems to me like it's gone from placating sustainability, sort of from niche to necessity or something like that, so I feel that too. But I want to ask you a slightly more personal question. So you once told me that you want to dedicate the next couple of decades of your life to protecting biodiversity, or something to that effect. And correct me if I'm wrong. And that's obviously really important to have players like yourself take it seriously. What motivates you to take this so seriously, to do the projects that you care about in this area? Why are you passionate about biodiversity? Where did that come from?
Well, it came from a lot of different places. And I'll tell you a quick story, which is that, I love the ocean. I love kind of being on the ocean. I live on the ocean. I spend a lot of time on the ocean. I love swimming in the ocean. If you've read my books, you know I love swimming with dolphins, and I've swam with whales in Tonga. And, I love the ocean. And then what I realized along the way is that the ocean was changing. That things were happening, the places that I had visited when I went back, that things had slightly changed. And what I found was, well, just one thing is ocean plastics. You could see that there was going to be more plastic in the ocean than fish by 2050, according to the World Economic Forum. So it kind of got my anxiety going right there. And then another level was I could see that in some areas, especially in areas of the South Pacific, we saw these very high rates of overfishing. Mm-hmm. And I was really like, wow, this is amazing. And if you pay attention to the corals, and if you're in the water with the corals, you see in some parts of the world, the corals are really changing.
Yeah.
And that can be through acidification. It can be through warming, but it also can be through runoff. That is just, fertilizer coming into the water. I was in one place in the South Pacific called Atutaki, and I got into this gorgeous lagoon and it was quite dead. And I was like, well, what happened? Well, we had a bad runoff from our farms and fertilizer into the lagoon. And it can come from septic in certain parts of Hawaii, for example, like in areas called Puako. They have a lot of septic leaks that, are not controlled, and septic can damage these corals. So there's all of a sudden very visible changes happening to the ocean when you see plastic or less fish, or all of a sudden you've got white coral instead of multicolor coral. And you say, what's happening? And it really brought me to thinking about what are things that we can do to improve the ocean. That's where we started the Benioff Ocean Initiative at the University of California, Santa Barbara. We did quite a few exciting programs. We all love the whales. we came up with this great program that you can see online. It's called Whale Safe. We used AI, we used sonar and ship communication to tell ships to slow down. Hey, there's a whale ahead. And it actually is working remarkably well. It's currently set up in the Santa Barbara Channel. It's about to be set up in San Francisco. We want to scale it globally. We also know AI can do a lot of other really interesting things in the ocean. And in another example at UCSB, we took drones and we took AI and we were able to spot great white sharks that were coming unusually close to beaches. And in one case where there was a surf school, we are able to automate a call to the Coast Guard or to the folks who are taking care of the kids on the beach. Hey, you want to get out of the water? Actually, there's a great white very close to you, and that's all like very well documented. So that was very inspiring. That there's things that we can do with technology or business or just inspiration. And we also saw Boyan Slat, this incredible kid out of Europe, build machines that were trying to clean the ocean and get the plastic out of the ocean. We also saw him pivot those machines to rivers because we saw that there's 9 rivers that represent 90% of all the plastic. So all of a sudden, we're cleaning the plastics. There's things we can do. And if we put our mind on things, if we focus on things, if we work on these things, we can make a difference. So it really started with the oceans.
Got it. Well, that's really fascinating. So you saw the changes that are happening and taking place in the oceans, and you saw there was something we could do. So it wasn't just the pessimistic shit, it's getting worse. It's here's something we can do about it. And that brings me nicely. I mean, you've talked about the role of ecopreneurs, and in this ocean area, we've just done something to maybe help some of that, which is Paul Allen helped to fund, as one of the last things he did, a project where we've mapped all the world's coral reefs systems.
Oh, I know it very well. The Coral Atlas. It's run by Greg Asner out of ASU. It's very impressive.
Yeah, and what we're hoping, by making some of it a digital public good, researchers can come do projects, ecopreneurs can help out. But let me ask a slightly broader question. I mean, you've talked about ecopreneurs and their role. How do you think that? How can we spur that to come alive? How do we make more ecopreneurs? What do you think is the answer to that, and creating more of those innovators to help these biodiversity challenges?
Well, the first thing I want to say is thank you to Paul Allen. We all miss him so much. And when you think about a great ocean philanthropist, he's the first person who comes to mind. And we think about the Allen Coral Atlas. It's a tremendous legacy that he has left to us and that we're able to now benefit from. So thank you to Paul. I also want to say, when you think about this ecopreneur revolution, and I would say this is important to me. There's like 4 things that are on my mind, which is I'm really trying to sequester 100 gigatons of carbon. I'm trying to accelerate Fortune 500 companies like my own to be net zero and renewable. I want to energize an ecopreneur revolution. I want to really enable reforestation. So I'm going to talk about those last 2 things right now.
Great.
When you look at ecopreneurship, kind of comes out of my work in the ocean where I saw, there is this opportunity to see people start to even take these ocean plastics that we're harvesting and turning them into products. Those are ecopreneurs. Another really interesting thing happened to me as I was working in the oceans. I ended up in this amazing environmental conference quite a few years ago now in San Francisco, where we both live. And it was with Jane Goodall. Of course, we all know Jane. She's just an institution in the world and just a great saint. We're so fortunate to have her. She's on the cover of Time magazine this week. If you haven't seen it, it's this incredible story about her.
And we were fortunate enough to interview her this time last year.
Oh, great. That's right.
Full conference. I think you had connected us, actually. It might have been.
Yeah. Well, she's had a huge influence on my life, Will. And I'll tell you something, which is that, she and I were at this climate. I'm going through the ocean story, just like I went through with you. Here's the ocean story. And here's what we're doing. And she goes, oh, that's very nice. Everything you're doing for the oceans. Wonderful. But what are you doing for the forests and the trees? And it stopped me. I stopped. I didn't know what to say. I had thought about the ocean quite a bit. was trying to do what I could do, you know, for SDG 14, the oceans. And she was right. I had not thought about the trees, and I had not thought about the forests, and to your point, even biodiversity. So it got me to start thinking, what can I do? What should I do? How should I think about it? So in one of the conversations that I then began to start answering that question was with Doug McCauley, the head of our UCSB Benioff Ocean Initiative. And I said, explain to me, what is the carbon math? How does it work? And, you know, the first thing, of course, is, you know, carbon is never created nor destroyed. It's a constant in the universe.
Not quite, actually. It's created by stars. But generally, it's pretty constant.
Mostly it's a constant.
I can give you an astrophysics explanation if you want, but yeah. But no, most of the time, roughly speaking, it's constant. Fine. Yeah.
Will, you're really breaking up my story here. And it was actually quite good up to that moment. But anyway, carbon is mostly a constant in the universe.
Mostly, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And thank you. I'm going to add mostly for you. And that, but here on Earth, you know, we're not, human beings aren't creating carbon. It's like this misconception. I'll say to people all the time, how much carbon have we created? And they'll have these numbers, 1 million such and such. I'm like, no, we're not haven't created any carbon this year here. So what I realized, what's that?
We've moved it around.
We've moved it around. We are remarkably good at moving it around, would you say? And we know how to move it around. And there's a lot of things we can do to move it around. Now, the Earth is also very good at moving it around. You know, it does that too. Like a volcano goes off, it's starting to move some carbon around. But there's other ways that carbon can get moved around, and that is with deforestation. And I think you know that we had 6 trillion trees on our planet. Each trillion trees holds about 200 gigatons of carbon. We've deforested, call it 3 trillion trees, about half the trees on the planet. When we did that, that releases 600 gigatons of carbon, and that's a lot of carbon getting moved into the atmosphere, and a lot of carbon that's not being stored in those trees, or like in my table that I have right here. This is a carbon storage vehicle right here, this table made out of wood. So that idea that, wow, we're interested in the climate, you're interested in acidification in the ocean, you need to be interested in the trees.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting, because you start to think about how the trees are related to the carbon. And when we talk about Ecopreneurs, you know, I'm involved with this company, very close to you. You've met these incredible entrepreneurs, Mac and Zach, who have a company called ncx.com. I'd encourage you to look at it. And they use AI to quantify, you know, they kind of have biometricians who are quantifying the amount of carbon in different parts of the world. I'm sure that Carbon Mapper will become a huge part of it, your new satellite. But right now they use drones and they use other things, and they're able to work with landowners and say, hey, you know, you are sequestering all this carbon. Why are you cutting these trees down? Which is kind of what landowners do. They're using the forest to make money. They said, we'll pay you not to cut down the trees. And that was very cool. And I was very impressed with that. And in fact, by doing that, they have agreements with so many landowners not to cut down the trees. And that is carbon storage. And we need to start thinking about what are other kind of technologies that we could create, and ecopreneurs like Max and Zach, and even yourself, who are able to create technologies to encourage people to give us more carbon storage, to give us, well, really 6 things. One is, we need less emissions. We all know that. We need less emissions, and that's extremely important. We've had more than 100 gigatons of carbon dispersed since the first industrial revolution. 2 is, we need sequestration. There's a lot of carbon now in the atmosphere through deforestation and other mechanisms and other things that have happened, including the volcanoes, you know, where you have carbon that has been put in the atmosphere. And if you go to the Mauna Loa volcano on the Big Island of Hawaii, okay, there is a set of equipment left there by Charles Keeling, who was a Caltech scientist. And in 1958, he set this equipment up to measure CO2 in the atmosphere. And if you've ever seen the Keeling curve, it goes up to the right, because every day since that day that he left the equipment there, the Caltech equipment, CO2 has gone up. Why? Well, there's some natural things happening. I mentioned the volcano, I mentioned deforestation, and I mentioned emissions. These things, we need to also therefore think about how are we going to sequester and bring down the carbon that's atmosphere. Number three, we have to think also about education. I think that this kind of a discussion is very important because I think for a lot of us, even for like CEOs, Will, like me and you, we need to be thinking about, what are things we can do, but we need education. I need to know more about how the stars are creating more carbon in the universe, evidently, but also a lot of people need to know about the relationship between the oceans and the trees and the biodiversity on the planet and this carbon mathematics. The ocean is sequestering 20,000 gigatons of carbon. The soils are sequestering about 3,000 gigatons of carbon. As I mentioned before, every trillion trees sequesters about 200 gigatons of carbon. So the question becomes, how do we get this math to work? Because right now it's not working in our favor, as evidenced by the Keeling curve. So 4 is really what you hit on, innovation. We need innovation. We need ecopreneurship. We need people like you and Max and Zach and thousands of others. And you can see it if you go to Uplink, which is the World Economic Forum's kind of community of ecopreneurs. It's a whole bunch of people who are trying to save the world by creating innovations to do exactly that. And there's a lot of very exciting people. I think about even somebody very close to you, a company called Pachama, who's built a whole directory of forest that you can get involved in saving. It's very cool. And there's so many other amazing companies. Another one I just heard about in Australia, the Soil Carbon Company, has created a fungus. And when you till it into your soil, it gives it the ability to sequester and store more carbon and restore the topsoil. Very cool. You can even see companies that are feeding methane to cows. Methane. They're feeding seaweed to cows so they have less methane. We're going to see that methane soon with your carbon map or satellite.
We will, even from cows.
That will be very important.
And what was the sixth thing? Or
and the sixth one is reforestation. We must reforest. So we must reduce emissions. We must sequester. We must educate. We must innovate. We must regulate. And that's why the Paris Accords and COP26 and all these things are so important and the EU Green Deal is probably the most important thing that I've seen.
I hope
because it is the catalyst to so many things, and we must reforest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's my mental model of what we need to do for climate change. And I think for CEOs now, obviously Salesforce is a little bit bigger right now than Planet. We're a Fortune, call it 100 company. We'll do about over $31 billion in revenue next year. We have to be a model. We have to be an example. We have to show the world it's possible. And here's how to do it. And here are things that we can do. We also make a sustainability cloud to kind of let our customers do the right carbon accounting and reporting, but we look at these companies doing project origination. That is ways that they can kind of create mechanisms to sequester carbon. This is extremely important. All of these things are important. The renewables, the sequestration mechanisms, the innovations, the regulations, all of these things are important. And we have to do all these things to make this happen.
And I super agree with your point about education, because I love your framework, the fact that you have a basic understanding of all these things and how they fit together. I have a slightly different one, but it's somewhat analogous. And I think if everyone has that sort of model going into the world, they really can see where they can help. I want to ask you a question. We're here at Planet Explore, right? All the users that use our data, and as I say, a part of our mission to help take care of spaceship Earth and make it a sustainable planet and a secure one. How do you see Planet fitting into this overall evolution? Just help us to frame where Planet fits in from your
yeah. Well, I think, what's interesting is you and I have known each other a long time, and I really have been really enamored with your innovation with Robbie, the work that you guys have done, getting the satellites working, getting them up there, the imagery, the data, the database, building a functional company, being pioneers in space, not just before what you did in your, kind of institutional jobs, now what you're doing as entrepreneurs. And it's very impressive. But what has brought me much closer, as you know, to Planet is all of a sudden my revelation, and I would also offer maybe your revelation as well, that these technologies and these images are maybe some of the most important things we're going to do to enable all these ecopreneurs. I think every ecopreneur is going to need this kind of information to, like, even in the examples that I've used here, we just don't have the data that we need, and we don't have the kind of real-time imagery that we need. In the classic example of, do we really know where all the methane leaks are on the planet? No, we don't. Why? Well, we need an eye in the sky there that can see methane. When you get that up there, that's going to be a revelatory experience where we say, wow, what's happening right here? And this is going to be absolutely critical for us. In the same way, that will enable ecopreneurs to do something about it. Another example, we can talk about Greg Asner's great work at ASU and what he's done with the Coral Atlas, but he's also your chief scientist on Carbon Mapper, and he has done a lot of work mapping carbon all over the world using aircraft. Instead of using aircraft, we can use satellites and go much faster. We can use AI, we can quantify, and we can pinpoint changes that we can rapidly make to A, let's preserve these incredible carbon stores, or B, let's look at where we're losing carbon stores and make sure that that stops. So these are very important moments. And I think that this technology, especially the planet technology, will enable the ecopreneur revolution. You heard that that's one of my 4 goals. Yeah. That ecopreneur revolution, energizing that ecopreneur revolution, I think that Planet's technology is critical to doing that. And that's why I'm excited to have this conversation with you and be more involved with Planet, and not just be a happy onlooker like I was for so long with you, but now to actually say, wow, this is very critical that we get this working correctly.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you for partnering with us. Thank you for giving your guidance and perspectives. And I hope we can be a tool that helps this ecopreneurial revolution. Obviously, we're mainly using our data to help the bigger companies, the bigger countries right now, and they need our data too to measure their ESG targets and so on. But I'm also, and perhaps even more excited by how we can help spur that democratization of the tools to the ecopreneurs that will enable us to really innovate on it to take better care of the planet. So thanks very much for joining us, Mark. Really appreciate you sparing the time to join us at Planet.
Great to spend time with you always.
Thanks a lot.